Everyone, thanks for joining us again. In earlier times, people used to trade with gold. They began storing their gold in vaults, which the vault owner would give them a receipt. This receipt was then used to trade for goods and services. The vault owners became the first bankers. These bankers figured out how much gold they needed in reserve to cover their returning customers, and they began loaning out receipts for more than they had in reserve and charging interest on gold they didn't have. Creating money out of nothing has continued to present times, which we'll get into. Fast forward to the years preceding 1912 and the infamous Titanic tragedy. Financial elites and other private bankers met in secret to draft the Federal Reserve Bank and discuss financing planned wars. These bankers were representatives of JP Morgan, an influential banker, investor, financer and owner of various companies, Rockefeller Financial Empire and the Rothschilds banking dynasty. The Rothschilds were banking agents for the Jesuits and hold the key to the wealth of the Roman Catholic Church. These are the three main opposers to the Federal Reserve Scheme and the various wars the financial families were planning. These are John Jacob Astor, who was the wealthiest man in the world at the time, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Isidor Straus, head of Macy's department stores. Their fierce opposition to the Federal Reserve Plan caused the Jesuits to order JP Morgan to build the Titanic, and a plan to eliminate these influential men began. These men had to be destroyed, and the Jesuits and controllers of JP Morgan, Rockefellers and Rothschilds knew that they would be able to use their wealth and influence to block the establishment of the Federal Reserve and the wars they had planned. These men, among many others, were coaxed aboard the Titanic, and Captain Edward Smith, a member of the Jesuit order, was under instruction and oath to destroy the Titanic on her maiden voyage, effectively initiating the demise of the opposing men. Privatisation of the US Federal Reserve was ushered into being just over a year later in 1913. A year after this, the financial elites or Illuminati aided in igniting World War I and subsequent wars to come. Operating outside the constraints of the US government and having power over money supply, the privatised Federal Reserve controls the government's central banking system. Through the Federal Reserve, the banks that loan money shape the world's landscape and have become one of the most powerful corporations. A basic hierarchy of the financial system places us, the citizens of countries, at the bottom, governments who forcibly control and tax us, corporations, the big banks who supply the corporations, the central banks such as the Reserve Bank of Australia, Bank of England and the Federal Reserve, the international central banks, the central bank of central banks, and the top financial elite or Illuminati who hold ultimate control over monetary and government systems in all countries. In 1911, legislation established the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. In 1915, this was preserved as the Reserve Bank of Australia in legislation to carry on central banking functions, and Commonwealth Bank became its own institution for commercial and savings banking. These are privately run corporations. JP Morgan's enterprise is the second largest shareholder of the Commonwealth Bank, as well as ranking on the shareholder list for the NAB and other corporations and banks, which you can find online, such as in the 2016 Commonwealth Bank of Australia annual report. The RBA determines how much money a bank must have in reserve, around 10%. Banks do not have gold anymore to back any of their circulating 90% of money, and thus are using fiat currency and fractional reserve banking. On to a quick overview of fractional reserve banking. If you deposit $10,000, the bank keeps 10%, or $1,000 on reserve and loans out $9,000 or 90% of the original deposit. That loan, for example, buys a car. The seller of that car then deposits the $9,000 in another bank, which is under the same central banking system. The money is redeposited and reloaned with interest until the original $10,000 becomes $100,000, and thus the bank's profit grows. The RBA loans money to governments and other banks by using fractional reserve banking and fiat currency. Fiat currency is simply money that is created from thin air, with no gold or physical backing. Banks print their own fiat or unbacked currency and loan it out, as well as buying real assets with it, fraudulently enriching themselves. Here is a quick overview of fraudulent loans. You take out a loan, say for a mortgage. You sign a contract with the bank. This contract acts as a promise to pay back the loan, with interest and fees over a certain period. This is a form of promissory note. The bank owns this promissory note, a piece of paper that is a $300,000 asset to them, or whatever the amount is. They create $300,000 on a computer out of nothing, of digital money, and lend it to you. You have given the bank a $300,000 asset to back the digital money that they loan to you with interest. Your contract is actually the only value here. When you make repayments, the interest becomes their profit, whilst the principal reduces the value of your contract or asset which you pay off until you pay off this loan and effectively your own value, which you created in contract out of thin air. Banking is just a huge player in the system of control and fraudulently sends society and the country into debt. Basically, everything you know is a lie, and we're here to give you the tools and information to uncover it. Thanks for joining us again. Stay tuned for more. Remember, you are your own master, and you are the one that is in control.